Story 1. If you want to get information out of strangers, get them off guard and try to put them in a position of assumed superiority. Dressing a little shabby, or just wearing one really stupid or ugly article of clothing helps. Appearing confused helps, and so does appearing tired. Think Columbo. If you're trying to get information about a person, imply familiarity. Don't ask a stranger what they know about Robert. Ask if they've heard from Bobby. Don't offer any explanation about why you want this information, unless they ask you. More often than not, they'll offer their own explanation that you can just agree with. Don't be afraid to cold call. Surprisingly, people will talk to you more often than not. Want to know something about someone? Knock on his neighbor's door. You will be surprised how much neighbors know about each other, and how willing they are to share that information. To defuse situations of potential conflict, increasing usual personal space by 50% not only keeps you out of punching range, but it reduces perceived threat to the other party. Assume a non-threatening stance. Lean against a wall, slouch a little, fold your arms, etc. Make sure you're at a safe distance, though. The idea is to appear calm and relaxed, not timid. If you're dealing with someone who is a bully or rager, they are used to getting their way by implying threats, by being physically imposing, by yelling, etc. Those behaviors are designed to make you either be afraid or fight back. By doing neither, you confuse the bully and short-circuit the behavior. Lower your voice to quieter than normal levels. If an angry and agitated person suddenly becomes calm, they are probably about to take a swing. Story 2. You can get a lot of information out of someone by just being silent. Creating an awkward silence will make people want to say something to fill it up, even if it's something they'd rather not talk about. I believe doctors sometimes use this to make people get into detail about their problems. Learning to shut up is one of the best things I have ever learned. It instantly gives you that mystery vibe, or murdery vibe if you do it like a creep, and people love to talk. Story 3. My boss has used this trick for years, and until recently, it got me every single time without me really paying attention. I'll come into his office to talk about something, and if it's too busy, he'll get up and walk out as he's talking with you. You feel compelled to follow him, of course. He walks to your desk and you feel compelled to sit back down. Then he walks away. You suddenly realize how you've been manipulated and feel stupid. Now, we've been working together for such a long time, I decided to break the cycle. One time, I just stood in his office when he passed me. He came back after a minute like, "Not gonna work, huh?" Story 4. If you're having a conversation with someone and you're unsure whether they're into it, you can make a change in the way you're communicating, either with body language or a slight change in accent, etc. If they start mirroring your change, cross their arms shortly after you do, you can assume that they're enjoying the conversation and listening to you. It's crazy how often it happens and you just don't notice it. Story 5. I try to smile whenever I make eye contact with someone, and especially if it's someone that I don't particularly like or doesn't particularly like me. 99% of the time, they will smile back at me. If you do this enough, your smile will actually be genuine. But this might not work if you have a really creepy smile. If someone is attracted to you, their eyes naturally open up more when they first see you. I either look for this in someone I am interested in or use it myself to, again, make someone who doesn't like me subconsciously feel less hostile towards me. To add to number 2, when I was a freshman in college, a friend of mine gave me a very valuable piece of information, which I have used several times since, and it has always been true. She said, when you're in a group and everyone is laughing, take note of who is looking at you. That person is attracted to you. This works as long as you have nothing to do with what is making everyone laugh. If you're just a bystander to the joke and the girl or guy looks at you while you're all laughing, then you know that you have an admirer. Try it out next time you're in a group of people. Story 6. The best way to make friends is to actually give a shit about people. Ask them about their day and actually care. People say, "How was your day?" all the time, and most people don't really care. Generally, if you ask someone about themselves, they'll like you. The reason I specifically focus on giving a shit is because many people have difficulty meeting new people, or thinking about questions to ask, etc. If you put all your attention into the other person, you become much less self-conscious. The problem with a lot of people that have social anxiety is that they don't focus correctly. If you play a video game but are trying to figure out a math problem in your head, you'll probably suck at the game. If you want to have a conversation, put all your focus on the other person and stop thinking about yourself or work or politics or whatever. A lot of people have a few poor conversations, get it into their heads that they have no social skills, and spend the rest of their life forever alone. It's amazing how many people think that their lack of an ability to communicate is something immutable in their nature. It's like playing some Counter-Strike, losing, and then going, well, I guess sucking at Counter-Strike is just a part of my nature. If you avoid playing Counter-Strike again, and the few times that you do play you think, gosh, I suck at this, then yeah, you're always going to suck at Counter-Strike. But if you focus on Counter-Strike and keep playing, you'll get good. And just like Counter-Strike, socializing is a learned skill. Story 7. I do a lot of presenting, and one of my favorite tricks deals with the awkward Q&A phase after the talk, when people will periodically toss you a hand grenade of a question and expect a good answer. Sometimes I'll know the answer right off, but when I don't, I like to take a second to frame my answer. Thing is, if you do that while staring at the audience or saying, then people tend to discount whatever answer comes next, regardless of how good it might be. So my secret is to time it so that as the person wraps up the question, I'm taking a big drink of water, or popping a breath mint, or taking a bite of food. Lunch and learn talks. It's socially acceptable not to talk with your mouth full, so everyone gives you those seconds to think without noticing that's what you've done. As a bonus, people often find the timing funny and will chuckle, improving the mood in the room. Story 8. This may sound stupid, but while in the Air Force, a detective told me if I ever had to interview a witness, to wear a light blue or pastel colored shirt, since the light colors are calming to the eye and you don't appear as though you are a threat or an authority figure. To this day, I always wear a light blue shirt to job interviews and performance reviews and have not had a bad review yet. Story 9. After the original .com bust, I was out of work and ended up selling cars for a bit. A manager told me that if the customers are hesitant, to get them in the office so you can sit down and talk. I asked how I get them in the office if they are just looking and not interested. He told me to invite them to the office and just turn and start walking. They will follow. So a few days later, I got some folks that were just looking. They weren't going to buy, and I felt like it was insulting to ask them to discuss nothing at length. But knowing the managers are always watching, I did the deed. Started walking and felt like I was on fire from nerves and not knowing. After 40 yards or so, I got to the building and turned around. And boom, there they were, standing there, ready to go in to talk. People will follow you. Story 10. If someone tells you something, but can't tell you the details, in other words, it's a secret, wait a while and then bring it up again. But act like you can't remember what they told you before. They'll gladly help you fill in the gaps in your memory, which will include stuff they didn't tell you before. I've done this a few times, accidentally, and I've been surprised at how well this has worked for me. Story 11. Speak to children and people with mental disabilities and illnesses as though they are responsible adults, and you'll be surprised at those who rise to the occasion. So often I deal with sick children who are more upset because their parents are freaking out. I always separate the parents and have them sit in the front of the ambulance, speaking to the child in the back, and I swear on my favorite goggles that it has never backfired. The same goes for disabled stroke patients, the mentally retarded, the schizophrenic, the bipolar, the autistic, the elderly. Just speak to them as you would a normal human being. Let them know what's going on. Give them the slightest say in what's going on around them, and they'll calm down and almost always cooperate. Don't reach for the handcuffs first. Just ask nicely to have them sit down. Also, sometimes being a girl helps. Story 12. If I'm nervous and or feeling socially awkward, I will ask the person I am talking to about themselves. That is the one topic everyone is each their own expert on. It's an instant conversation booster, and the act of listening will make you more friends than talking, in my experience. Story 13. Anytime you encounter a dinner moment that feels awkward, just ask a ton of questions about their life. They'll think you're extremely charismatic when all you've done is make them talk about themselves. Never ask a yes or no question, because that just adds to the awkwardness. So, how did you get into this profession? Tell me about your family. What's your favorite part of living here? What's the hardest part of traveling? Or the best? I'm sure you've got a lot of great stories because of that. Story 14. Took cognitive psych at a big university. 220 students in the class. Only 40 showed up to each class. A few days before the final, when there was just 40 of us, she said, "One effective test taking technique that people don't often know to use is the memory dump." Har har. People cram hours before a test, but by the time you get to working on it, your short term memory will start to fill with other things, and your answers will fade away. To counteract this, immediately turn the test over as soon as you receive it and write down everything you can remember as quickly as possible. Then, use that as a cheat sheet for the duration of the test. This is not against any rules, since you're still reproducing the material yourself onto the test paper, which proves it was recalled during test time. The final comes around, and people are looking around confusingly as some of us are madly scribbling on the back. Freaking aced that shit. Story 15. Tell something personal about your life. Be very open and honest in your conversation. Watch it be reciprocated 9 out of 10 times. Often, people always say, "I can't believe I'm telling you this. I never told that to anyone." I like it. It opens everyone up more, and you get a better understanding of that person and way more respect for them as a human being. Story 16. Alright, if you want someone to do some moderately big favor for you, ask them to do something even bigger that they'll almost always say no to. Then ask them to do the smaller favor, and since they feel guilty for saying no to the big one, they're more likely to say yes to the small one. For example, if you want someone to fill in as a camp counselor for you for a day that you can't show up, you can ask them to be a counselor for the entire week. Sounds desperate, and stress it's a good cause. They'll be busy, so they'll say no. Then you ask them if they can do it on just Saturday. They're more likely to say yes. If you ask someone to waste a Saturday up front, they'll probably just say no. They'll compare the first favor to the second, and it'll be much smaller and much easier to say yes to. And it's hard to say no many times in a row to someone you like. Story 17. This is a trick I enjoy doing to groups of people I meet in front of friends who already know about it, and usually have had it done to them before. I will tell an engaging story that people listen to, and I act animated while I do it. It doesn't have to be true or anything, just somewhat plausible and engaging enough that people are listening intently for the punchline of the story. While doing this, ask people to hold something at the same time and hand it to them. Do it passively. At the end, just walk away, and people end up holding stuff. On my birthday, my mother, my mom, my girlfriend, my brother's girlfriend, and a few friends were standing around, and I was telling a story. The story didn't matter. What mattered was that they were all listening intently. I ended up handing my mom a couple of boxes of Chinese food, my brother several dirty dishes. I put some cups in my brother's girlfriend's hand, in exchange for her wallet that she gave me in this mix, and several things in each person's hand. I finished the story walking away, and they all slowly came to the realization that they were all holding dirty dishes and trash that I handed to them for no reason. It's a fun party trick. Story 18. There are certain kinds of people, examples given police, authority figures, etc., who are really, really inflexible and try to stop you from bending stupid rules even slightly. They don't care about the rules. They just want you to be right and for you to obey them. So if you want to get your way, instead of arguing about how stupid the rule is, say something like, "Of course, you're right. I didn't know that. Thanks for telling me. Next time I will obey the rule." Story 19. Here's a great one for cops that's worked surprisingly well for me in the past. If you're pulled over, when the cop walks up to you, initiate the conversation by asking, "How are you today?" They have to answer something like, "Doing well," or "I'm okay, how are you?" Immediately, you have broken their defensive wall. I've gotten out of many tickets by getting on the cop's good side before he has even engaged me. That, or if you're pulled over for something minor, but you've done something incredibly exciting that day, get enthusiastic about it. I had just left a Hurricanes game and had an out headlight and was speeding a bit, and the cop asked where I was heading. "I'm heading home after the Canes game." "Oh, how was it?" Door open to me being super excited. Disclaimer: this does not work when, OMG, I was at this kegger. Story 20. Here's a trick I've learned from being in a happy relationship for years and working in the service industry. Don't try to deceive people with psychological tricks, or else you're going to acquire a bunch of friends who you don't like and will hate you when they finally get to know you. Be brutally honest always, and you will slowly learn your faults and find true companionship instead of living a lie your entire life just to get new jobs and avoid arguments. Story 21. In high school and university, when there was about 10 to 15 minutes left in class, I would zip my bag up, loudly a couple of times, up and down. What resulted was a cascading effect, everybody starting to put their things away. This would oftentimes lead the professor or teacher to let the class out early, as everyone is clearly packing up. The sound of the zipper triggered something in everybody. Pavlovian conditioning in action. Story 22. If you need to get hold of somebody via telephone, but you get their voicemail instead, there's a trick you can use that will always get them to call you back. It's sleazy, but it works 100% of the time. Call them and leave the voicemail. In the message, tell them you've discovered something important. Start describing the important thing, then hang up mid-sentence. They'll call you back ASAP because their curiosity will get the better of them. They've just got to find out what was so important, and if you did the message correctly, they'll think the only reason you didn't tell them the important thing was due to a telephone glitch. This trick works especially well if you're in sales. When the customer calls you back, make up something important and tell them. But the real purpose of the message was to get the customer to call you back, period. Now, you have an opportunity to sell. Like I said, sleazy, but it works. Story 23. The easiest way to lie is to know when to stop telling the truth. A man goes to a bakery in the morning to get donuts for his 3 children. While there, he buys a 4th that he's not supposed to have because of his diet, and eats it on the drive home. When asked, "What did you get at the store?" he can truthfully answer, "I got the kids some donuts." And because this is not an untruth, he's going to state it with far more conviction than if asked, "Did you buy yourself a donut?" and having to answer untruthfully, "No, I did not." In other words, to make sure that you're getting the right answer, make sure you phrased your question correctly. Story 24. At a college party not so long ago, I invented the imaginary beverage technique for making your way through a crowd. In the absence of a solo cup or other form of drink, I found that holding up your hand as if you had one makes the C part significantly faster. Effects are amplified if you announce "imaginary beverage" while making your way through the crowd. I guess people just don't want beverages spilled on them, even imaginary ones. Story 25. Start touching your elbows together with a quizzical look on your face while hanging out with girls. When she becomes interested in what you're doing, say you can touch your elbows in front of you, but you can't touch them behind your back. Then bet the girl that she can't touch her elbows behind her back. It doesn't matter if she can or not, but her breasts will be poppin'. Story 26. You know how sometimes you're walking and you see someone walking towards you and you both try to move out of the way, but you end up walking into each other awkwardly? If you can see someone walking in your path, avoid eye contact. Make sure they don't see that you see them. That's the most important part. And just keep walking. 9 times out of 10, they will move past you without noticing or walking into you. Problem solved. Story 27. I want to get a new camera, but it's $2,000. There's another one I was looking at for $1,000. The one I really want, but it doesn't have all the features of the $2,000 camera. Not as nice, but a lot less expensive. What do you think? Story 1. One that I picked up from a friend of mine whenever he was trying to pick out dinner with his girlfriend. Rather than ask, "What do you want?" and getting the typical, "I don't know, anything" answer, and then having suggestions shot down, start with, "What do you not want?" Used it a few times in some of my relationships, and it's the godsend question. Story 2. I work at the front desk in a medical office. Patients hate updating their paperwork. I used to say, "Look through the pages and make any changes." They would groan and reluctantly take the paperwork, or just complain about it. Now I say, "All you have to do is make changes." Saying it that way makes them think it's not much to do, and they take the clipboard without complaint. It's the little things that make life at my office easier. Story 3. How to de-escalate an incredible upset mental health patient who is either unknown or prone to violence. Though it works on most anyone. If they are at level 10, you come in at a level 7. Being completely calm, reserved, and polite only pisses people off more, as you clearly don't understand the magnitude of the situation. If they are screaming and yelling, you need to come in loud, but not attacking them. Instead, agreeing with them, to a point. "Whoa, what the hell is going on? I understand why you're pissed. I would be pissed too. Yeah, that is some bullshit. The situation really sucks. Look, I get it. I would be angry too, but us screaming isn't going to accomplish anything, no matter how angry we are. I'm with you. I'd be just as upset. No doubt this is annoying, but these are our options." By agreeing with their anger, they are more open to listen to you. You then use words to describe their feelings, starting out at a 10. Being pissed, and gradually bringing those descriptive words and your tone down to a 2, annoying. Works pretty much every time, but there might be a little up and down in the middle. Just follow the person's lead while always being a level below them. Story 4. Saying hello to everybody you know, and with a smile. Often, people who know each other from when they were in primary school, or just from the block when they were young, give each other an awkward smile instead of a happy good day. Just imagine, if someone walks into you twice a year and both times you smile and greet them enthusiastically, they will think of you as a nice person. So little effort for a person to find you friendly. Story 5. This isn't something I've used, but I think it's worth sharing. Darren Brown said once that there was a muscly drunk guy that wanted to beat him up, and said the classic, "What are you looking at?" Darren replied with, "The wall outside my house is 4 feet tall." The idea is that it puts the aggravated person on the back foot and takes them out of that adrenaline-filled state. Anyways, he sat down, and the guy started crying to him about his girlfriend. He is Darren Brown, though, so I wouldn't recommend this to everyone. Story 6. Think of my future self. How will my future self feel in an hour or two if I skip my gym session? Will my future self be happy if I do this pile of dishes now, before bed? Or would he prefer to have to do it in the morning, before work? I have a 3-month deadline on this project. Will my future self appreciate my current self taking the first 3 or 4 weeks easy? Or will he be really pissed off? Essentially, delayed gratification. Pretty much all the bad stuff gives us instant gratification, while all of the good stuff has delayed gratification. I always try to remember that. If I have to wait to reap the rewards, then it's probably the best option. Story 7. I don't know if this is an actual thing or not, or maybe just distractions. But when I do something annoying or bothersome to my husband and he goes quiet, I wait a few minutes, and then I ask him a seemingly innocent question, usually on the subject of how certain parts of a car works, or something mechanical. This gets him talking about the car thing, and he rambles for like 5 minutes, and then bam, he's happy again, and not quietly brooding. I will never tell him I do that, because I'm afraid it won't work anymore if he knows about it. It's foolproof though. It works every single time, no matter how bothered he is. Story 8. Listening to someone without giving advice or pushing for more information typically nets me more information than being pushy for it. If you want to hear what someone has to say, just let them speak. If they stop, just wait. They will continue speaking and adding to what they were saying to fill the silence. I've done this a lot. Story 9. When somebody's shy of speaking, if you look at them and nod your head, it encourages them to keep talking. I'm hard of hearing. I've spent a lot of my life nodding at my family to show I've heard and understood so they don't ask, "Did you hear that?" I do it at work, especially in meetings. I get a lot of attention from the speaker as I look like the only person actively listening. Story 10. I'm a professional poker player. When I'm in a pot with one other player, I often try to make them laugh when they are thinking about what to do. If you can get them to laugh, it sets them in a mood where they are unlikely to bluff. I talk a lot in general. It's very common to make jokes at the table, even in hands. Story 11. Music. Putting headphones in and playing the music that I know I'd want to hear if I was in the mood that I want to be in shifts me over to that mentality and really helps when I need to calm down or when I need to feel happier. I feel like this is the audio version of dressing for what you want. I get into my gym clothes even when I feel sluggish because it will put me in the mood to work out. Or I'll put on work clothes even if I'm working at home because I'll be more productive or more professional on the phone than if I were wearing pajamas. Story 12. My wife calls this the simplest, most manipulative thing I do. Whenever I bump into an acquaintance, meaning not friend, just a person I know, I of course say hi, and the conversation goes like this. Me. Hey, what's your name? You look good. Them. Thank you. I'm good. How are you? Me. Great. I'm on the way to wherever I'm going at the time, and tell them why too. So what are you doing here? Them. Go into some detail to tell me where they're going and why. Me. All right. Well, I won't keep you any longer than I have. Have a good day. It leaves people feeling good, takes away the awkwardness of cutting a convo short, and it makes them want to leave. Story 13. If someone says they have the hiccups, ask them to prove it. 9 times out of 10, their hiccups will disappear. Having to summon a hiccup in order to demonstrate will trick your diaphragm into just not hiccuping. I've even been able to twist it around on myself with some success, but it takes practice. You realize you have hiccups, then try to hiccup. Actively trying to make yourself do another one, it'll stop. Story 14. If you need to de-escalate someone and get them to communicate, ask questions about numbers or personal information. I work in emergency services. If someone is totally distraught and shut down, asking their phone number, address, SSN, birth date can pull them out of the emotional place and bring them back to a headspace where they can talk about what happened more easily. I often ask these questions even after I have the information, just to de-escalate. Story 15. I work with a bunch of idiot lawyers, and I use the phrase, "you're correct," all the time. Even if it's one teeny tiny thing they're correct about, it makes them feel smart, and they are instantly softened. It also keeps them listening because they're hoping more flattery will come down the pike. I speak at conferences all over the world, and a lot of the speakers use this in their Q&A. If there's a particularly hard question to answer, they always start with, "What a great question," etc., etc. Generally speaking, the asker is so pleased that their question got praised by the speaker in front of all those people that they are less critical of and pay less attention to the actual answer. Story 16. My youngest, 4, got into the why phase a little while back. Read an article that said the best way to get them to stop was to ask them, "I'm not sure. What do you think?" It is a godsend. They answer their own question. You provide some feedback, sounds good to me, and they immediately move on. Awesome. Story 17. When I ask someone a question and their first response is what? I just stare at them for a few seconds, and 99% of the time they answer my question without me having to repeat myself. I think it's just a subconscious reflex people have to ask what, instead of answering what you've asked, even if they've already heard you clearly. Story 18. Smiling. Smile at the bartender. They'll be more likely to come to you quicker. Smile at your colleague in the morning and they'll be more open to the request that you've got for them later. Smile at your kids and they'll feel loved. Smile at your partner and they'll wonder what they've done that's made you so happy. Smile at me and I'll smile back and we'll both feel great for a few minutes. Smile at everyone when you meet them. Smile in a job interview. Smile at the shop worker, the bin man, the postman, the random dog walker in the park, the person who nearly bumped into you on the street, the barista, your teacher, your mom and your dad. Smile at yourself in the mirror and give yourself a cheeky wink. Story 19. Whenever I know somebody is holding some truth for me, I'll look at them and stay silent. No nodding, no acknowledging, just looking. The silence usually brings out the truth or extra detail. If they squirm around a bit, you know there's something they have exaggerated. Story 20. Don't say it's okay when someone apologizes. Say something like, "Thank you for apologizing." If someone needs to apologize to you, then it was something that isn't okay. My mom teaches this to her kindergartners, and it really does make a difference. Opens doors for growth and conversation too. "Thank you for apologizing. I don't like it when you hit me," or whatever. Story 21. This is really not too original, but I've seen the wonders positive enforcement does on people's motivation. I teach English to university students. Many of them are there because they have to be, and learning English is a waste of their time. They're usually my worst students. When I give them feedback, I usually heavily stress what they can do already and congratulate them on their improvement, even if minimal, before telling them the mistakes they had. I do this with all my students, but with those who are particularly dismissive, I take extra care to let them know what they're doing right. Some people jumped from hating the language and being terrified of making mistakes to being some of my most proficient students. Overall, each of them showed considerable improvement and engagement in class, never letting that one go. Story 22. I work as a creative director. I have a lot of great clients, unfortunately with a few crappy managers from their side. They usually go with the mantra of, "If it's not my idea, it's not a good idea." Sometimes, I end up telling them about something Google, Tesla, Amazon, Samsung, etc. is doing, and how we could try it. They jump at these ideas. The ideas are actually mine or my team's. Works like a charm. Use this sparingly. Using it as an easy escape is not a good idea. It works, but I know when to use it. If you use it all the time, it won't make you look any better. It will also allow people to be promoted who aren't capable of doing the job, pointed out by Rootfoot. Thank you. Good luck, everyone. Story 23. I currently manage around 240 people between 6 restaurants. It's often hard to get them to do what is needed. I have found saying, "I need your help" is sufficient to get them on board. People want to feel needed and like they are making a difference. Expressing to them as much makes all the difference in the world. Story 24. When I'm doing backcountry hiking patrol in a wilderness area, I'm supposed to keep an eye out for people with dogs, which are not allowed. The ranger taught me to ask any dog walker, "Are you looking for somewhere to walk your dog?" That gives them the chance to pretend they didn't know about the rule. Signs posted, of course, so they don't lose face. Then I give them a brochure with dog-friendly trails. It's a brilliantly non-confrontational technique, and I use it in other parts of my life. Story 25. If you need to remember something, think about it while doing something noticeably unusual. This will pair the memory with the something, so that when it is noticed later on, it will trigger that particular memory. Example, I need to take out the garbage before going to bed. Put your pillow at the foot of your bed. Story 26. A few of my favorites. If you look happy to see someone every time you see them, they will eventually be happy to see you. Be nice, even to mean people. It's kind of fun to see someone initially angry soften when you don't give in to anger. Do not insult people. Tell them how you wish they'd behave. For example, someone is obviously rude. You just say you really like when they're nice to you. They can't really call you out on it and possibly make them realize their behavior. Ask big, knowing it will be dismissed. Then ask for the thing you really want. There's a real term for it, open door technique or something. It's actually a door in the face technique. Thanks, everyone. Story 27. When someone starts making fun of you, you make fun of yourself in a more clever way. If the person is doing it for attention, it wrestles the attention away from them if you're more funny than they are, and gives them negative feedback towards making fun of you going forward. It doesn't always work because some people do it purely for self-enjoyment, but at least it will be clear pretty fast that the person is a piece of trash, which comes with its own social drawbacks. So in the end, the person has the choice between getting outdrawn or looking like a bully. Story 28. I'm not sure this counts as a psychological trick, maybe more of a mindset change, but I'll share anyways. I regularly get bored and play video games for hours, or resort to wandering around the kitchen looking for food I wasn't even hungry for. Now, whenever I get bored, I try to force myself to do something productive, whether that be washing a few dishes, playing with my cats, taking a shower, going for a walk. You get the drift. It's helped me with my depression a bit because I feel like I accomplished something rather than just sitting around boredom eating. Story 29. If I'm having a conversation that's a bit difficult, or I don't have a lot to say, then I'll repeat the last word or phrase that the other person said with a slight tilt of my head, as if I'm rephrasing it as a question. Virtually all the time, they'll expand or elaborate on what they said previously and then move on to something else too. I can keep a whole conversation going just by doing this, but a lot of the time, it'll also help the other person to open up, and they'll feel like they've been able to have their say. Sometimes it's useful when you don't give a shit and can't be bothered with the conversation, but you don't want to be rude. However, it's also very useful when you do want to hear from someone and genuinely want them to share something. So, it can be useful for both good and evil. Story 30. If a child tells you they're afraid of a monster in a closet, instead of telling them there is no monster, ask them to describe the monster and what they think the monster is doing there in the first place. Then ask how to get the monster to leave. It will help them alleviate their fear far more effectively than instinctively trying to tell them there is no monster. Story 31. 2 tricks I use for myself. This one's inspired by the show Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Basically, if I have a difficult task, I tell myself to just try really hard for 30 seconds. 30 seconds isn't much after all. I can literally hold my breath many times longer. Once that 30 seconds is up, I reset and tell myself to try really hard for another 30 seconds. I mean, it's just 30 seconds. Another thing that helps me when I have a long task is to visualize myself being already done with the task and pretending that what I'm experiencing is just my future self reminiscing. It's kind of trippy. Reminds me of the movie Arrival. Story 32. I work in an office. When people stop by my desk and refuse to leave me alone, I will get up and refill my water bottle while they are talking to me. Instead of walking back to my desk, I walk them to theirs. They instinctively will sit down. Then I just serve the convo and get back to work. Story 33. When I want someone to like me more, I will ask them to do me a small favor. Psychologically, people will often convince themselves that they like you as a way to justify their investment in a favor or the expenditure of energy on your behalf. Story 34. Have a toxic person you need to try and get through to without calling them out directly and risk bearing the brunt of their meltdown? Tell a story about how some annoying idiot behaves in a certain manner, citing the toxic person's behavior here, and how frustrating, pathetic, lame, etc. it is. The toxic person's ego will take over and they will tone down that behavior. Works like a charm. Also, it's safe because they're narcissists and could not fathom that their behavior is frustrating. So they won't make the link and figure out what you're doing. Story 35. This will get buried, but when I quit smoking, I left 1 cigarette in a pack in my car. I called it my last cigarette. I never told myself I was quitting. I was going to save my last one for when I really wanted it. I was a pack a day for 10 years, and I'm 4 months smoke-free this month. I still haven't quit. I'm just saving my last one. Story 36. Whenever I'm walking through a crowd, I always look at my destination while being aware of my peripherals. Most people will pick up on your body language and avoid running into you. Just don't forget to keep an eye out for rude people who will run right into you because they were too busy Googling their phone screens. Story 37. Avoid using sorry whenever it isn't necessary. If something is taking longer than anticipated, don't keep apologizing, as it puts you on the back foot. Instead, thank people for their patience, and generally, they're a lot more understanding of the situation. I come from the UK, where we have a huge apologizing culture, and this handy trick has helped more times than I can count.
Story 1. Certified hypnotist here. You want a dark, here you go. Leading a topic by stating something you know the subject will agree with. Transition to a restatement or whatever it is they agreed with and alter it slightly. End with a rhetorical question leaning towards agreement. Isn't that right? If you're slow and careful about this, you can get people to concede or agree to nearly anything without even noticing. Number 2. This one is incredibly simple. Consistently thanking someone for very, very basic things. Things you might not even thank someone for. Think moving out of the way for you or handing you your water bottle from a few feet away. Once you make the interaction consistent enough, they will be used enough to the praise that you will be missed. Then, don't thank them for one or two things, and they will very frequently go out of their way in order to earn your thanks. Story 2. Silence. If you want to know something, ask the question, then wait. People want to fill the silence and will talk and talk. This works so well. You don't even have to want to know something. If you're just too lazy, /tired, /bored, /uninterested to take part, you can just make the other person do all the work by remaining quiet. I like to nod knowingly now and then while I'm thinking about something else. Story 3. If someone doesn't want to give you specific information, like tuition costs or hours expected, give them an example that's completely unreasonable. They will usually immediately give you the exact number and feel embarrassed for pretending not to know. Example, me. How much does your C++ course cost? Them. It really depends on what your goals are. Me. Don't you have a beginner's course? Can you give me a price range? Them. We can work with you to fit your individual needs. Me. Okay, fine. So is it like $10 for access to your courses or them? Oh no, we have a subscription for $99 a month. You can buy beginner's courses for $120. Not useful very often, but it works every time. Story 4. One thing that my dad does that he may be completely unaware of is when you give him good news, he always exaggerates it back to you, thus forcing you to downplay your own accomplishment. I honestly don't think he's consciously doing it, but it drives me absolutely crazy. Hey, I have amazing news. I got promoted to vice president. That's great. Wow. So senior vice president? No, just vice president. Oh, well, that's still good. And now the wind is all out of my sails. When I was a kid, I'd try to tell my mom something I was excited or passionate about, and all that I would get would be, I wish you were this passionate about school. I hated it every time. Story 5. Not really a dark trick, but one that I found effective. When someone's being rude to you, stay completely silent and stare at them. Make them feel incredibly uncomfortable, and they'll usually act civilly after a few moments. Edit. Disclaimer. Do not do this to people who are exhibiting aggressive behavior or while it's unsafe, non-public environment. This will not work on the local thug in the street and will likely cause you harm. This is a tactic meant to be used on otherwise mature adults in safe environments. Story 6. If you want to be an effective liar, build up a reputation of being honest. The more you are known as being reliable, the easier it is to deceive and manipulate. Not terribly complex, I know. Story 7. People start to believe something if they're told it over and over and over, even if it goes against everything they know. That's why the news is so important to pretty much every government on Earth. They get to decide what we hear over and over. Story 8. Don't react when somebody is getting unnecessarily angry. Drives them crazy. I like to call it turning off my face. Just give them a dead, completely neutral stare and stay silent. Whenever they refer to what's actually bothering them, I give a slight nod in confirmation that their concern is valid, but otherwise I just become a statue. Eventually they stop talking, or they get so riled up they go off on a completely unrelated tangent. If they stop talking, I can calmly jump in with, so what I'm understanding is, and then repeat their concern. If they go off on a tangent, I interrupt them with, we're getting off on a tangent. Your concern was blank. Let's talk about that. If they interrupt me, I'll interrupt them right back with, no, you just spoke for 15 minutes. It's my turn. That last part, it's my turn, always gets them to pause and they become strangely compliant. It's something we're conditioned to respond to as kids, and it still works when you're 40. Story 9. The wording of the questions often influences the answer. For example, to the question, how fast were you going when they crashed? People give, on average, an estimated speed that is faster than what the question is formulated as. How fast were the cars going when they collided? Story 10. My boss likes having meetings after 5 p.m. even though I technically can be there for it. I don't want to, so I tell him I have an important class I'm going to at exactly 5:54. Show up for about 5 to 10 minutes of the meeting, then leave. Thinks I'm an amazing team player for going out of my way to hop in for just a few minutes, when in reality I have no class to attend and I hate those meetings. Story 11. Not so dark, but humans have predictable patterns when choosing stuff at random. If you ask 100 people to pick a number 1 through 10, a great deal of those people choose 3 or 7. Even numbers, high/lowest, 1 and 10, and the middle number, 5, doesn't feel random enough. So when I play board games like Caton or card games where the others have to pick a random number out of my hand, I always put my most valuable cards on either side, not in the middle since the middle feels more random. Story 12. Mirroring is incredible. You can pull it off from a simple swinging on a chair or a gentle smile. You can actually control their presence. I did some anti-mirroring to a salesman at my door once. I leaned against my door frame. He leaned against my porch post. As soon as he did, I stood up straight. He stood up straight. I leaned against my door frame again. Rinse and repeat for about a minute. He lost his train of thought, got nervous, and said he had to go. It was kind of funny. Story 13. Sunk cost. Basically, any time or effort or money that has already been expended or spent tends to be factored into decision making even though it shouldn't. When I met my wife, she would always finish her drinks even if she didn't like them because she paid for them. I asked her, if you already paid for them, then the money is already gone. Why suffer through a drink you don't like if there is literally no change in outcome as opposed to not drinking it, except not enjoying it? This is why buying a car takes so long. You have spent so much time already that you almost feel like you have to buy it. You have invested time and need to get something for that investment. Oh my gosh, I don't want to go through this again. Story 14. Waiting several seconds or up to a minute to say something after someone has given you an offer or asked you for something will make what you say next high likely to be agreed with. Most people hate uncomfortable silence, especially salespeople. Story 15. People want to be acknowledged, accepted, and appreciated. It takes almost nothing to give them that, but empires have risen and fell because of it. People will be so happy that you've given it, even if they know they're being manipulated. They'll ignore the manipulation for the sake of what you're giving them. Story 16. It depends on what you hand them. Working retail, I've learned that if you hand someone something while they're talking, they will take it. Put it in their pocket, purse, etc., and then have no recollection of you ever giving them something. It has worked on every person I have tried it with. Edit, lol, no, I didn't make anyone shoplift. It was usually their receipts, pens, or the credit card slips, etc. Then after them talking, they'll ask for it and I'll tell them they pocketed it. But I learned this is a real psychological trick and also to wait until they're done talking to hand them something. Story 17. If you want someone to like you, ask them to do small favors for you and be very appreciative when they comply. Positive reinforcements for your tasks, just like training a dog. Even better if you actually give them treats like a dog. Food is a very primary reinforcer after all. Story 18. Whenever I want to help someone with something, but I know their pride gets in the way or they don't want to impose, I ask them for a favor first, even if I don't really need it. Examples would be like asking a peer how they arrived at a solution for XYZ, and then replaying the favor by going, you want to see something really cool I learned recently? And showing them how to do something more efficiently/correctly. Or when you know your parents' heater is broken but they insist on calling a repairman instead of troubling you, and suddenly you need to borrow sugar while you're over there, might as well check out that heater. People like to feel helpful and like to give unsolicited advice. It works out. Story 19. I used to work at a chain bookstore and part of the job was getting all the books people took off the shelves, took to another part of the store to flip through, and then left, and putting them back in their proper spot. That was a lot of work and I didn't want to do. I would get a pile, go talk to a coworker, kept eye contact but held out the pile of books to them while talking. Whoever I was talking to took the pile every time. I'd walk away before they noticed they had them. Story 20. Being over-the-top friendly usually counteracts aggressive behavior. I used to have this customer who was always super rude and verbally aggressive on the phone. I started being extremely friendly to her the second I picked up the phone. She just did not have the chance to be rude to me. It doesn't work with everyone though. The smarter they are, the faster they're on to you. But it's usually the dumbest people who are the most aggressive to customer support anyways. Another tip. Always be friendly to customer support. I did support for a long time. Guess which customers got the fastest help? Or got helped with problems that technically were their own to solve, but I helped them anyways, or at the very least, sent them in the right direction, or sent them a link to the correct page in the online manual. Guess which customers paid for every single second they were on the phone, plus the time it took for me to register that time. And which ones I don't even bill if it was just a 5-minute phone call. Friendliness pays off in a lot of ways, short-term and long-term, even if you're faking it most of the time. Story 21. If someone is bothering you at your desk too often, continue the conversation but get up and walk them back to their desk. Had a boss who was a guru at this. You'd be back at your desk wondering how the fuck you got there. Story 22. If you want to extract agreement from someone you know reasonably, we'll begin the conversation by talking about occasions in the past when you have cooperated to achieve a common goal. 1 or 2 examples is enough. This primes them to go along with your current proposal. Story 23. The power of suggestion is incredibly potent. Most people underestimate how this tool can affect others. For example, I had a sociology class in high school. It was that or health. And we had to build, conduct an psychological/sociological experiment and write a report on our findings. We were in groups of 4. We had free reign to do what we wanted, but it could not be immoral or unethical. But being the group of antisocial rebellious teens, we decided to do an experiment on suggestion. It was relatively simple. We picked 3 subjects and chose a positive and negative suggestion, and the third was our control. Now we picked 3 people, 1 popular, 1 not so popular, and someone in the middle, control. These subjects were picked so each one of the group members would have an interaction every class period for 1 whole day. For the popular girl, subject A, we decided to simply ask her if she was feeling alright, but she looked pale. Unpopular male, subject B, we asked why they didn't speak up more in class and that they should do it. We chose suggestions that would be counter to their personalities. Control, subject C, we simply asked how their day was going. By the end of the day experiment, subject A had gone homesick after 3 class periods. Subject B had an overall increase in participation that lasted several days after the conclusion of the experiment, and Subject C showed baseline behavior. Now, we did get in trouble because what we did was unethical, but the teacher was so impressed with our report that he let us slide and made us apologize to the participants. Story 24. Asking someone to do you a favor makes them like you more. Seems wrong on the surface, but shown to be true. So, ask your boss for small personal favors every now and again. Also, if you want someone who has no opinion of you to think well of you, you can try this psychotic move. Act rude towards them. Not overly, just some small transgression. Seek them out the next day and apologize for your behavior, stating that you had a bad day and later regretted whatever you did. Now that they know you, wave hi when you see them. They will end up with a positive opinion of you. Story 25. I was a gymnast in college. When the younger hotshots were warming up for competition, just before warm-ups end and it all gets real, one of us would say, "Wow, that's a great trick." One question. When you're doing that insane maneuver on the apparatus, when do you breathe? Screws them up every time. Story 26. People love talking about themselves. Ask questions about their personal lives. Act interested in everything they say. I've carried on entire working relationships with people who couldn't tell you anything about me beyond my physical appearance, or incorrectly assumed that I had their exact same interests and opinions. After you get to that point, they're not really sharing information with as strangers so much as with a psychological extension of themselves. Story 27. A competitive environment, if you notice that your opponent is a beginner or showing signs of anxiety, ask them, "Are you nervous?" while trying to act as nonchalant as possible. I'll even yawn if I can. This always gets in people's heads at Street Fighter if they aren't mentally strong to begin with. Story 28. The easiest way to tell a lie is to let the person you're lying to come to their own conclusion of the lie, and then agree with that conclusion. Another thing you could do to easily decrease the chance of you getting caught in a lie is just not to lie, so that when you do lie, it's presumed to be a truth. Story 29. I learned this from my psychologist in order to defend myself from a toxic/manipulative relationship I was in, but at that moment, I had no possibility of leaving, because of economical, social issues I had at the time. My boyfriend was really manipulative, and in order to pressure me out of not breaking our relationship, he consistently said things like, "Everyone says we are a great couple," or "Our friends see us and they say you seem happy." In that occasions, I started asking him, "Who said that? Can you name them?" Or "What exactly did they say? Can you quote?" When the answer was obviously no, I played the reverse card, assuming things incorrectly like he did, and went, "Was it Jessica? Seems like the only one who says things like that. Let me ask her." Or, "I will text my friend group now, asking who said you are a perfect couple to you." That usually freaked him out, and I guarantee you it is very funny to see a narcissist lose their shit. Story 30. Having a heated argument. Ask the other person if they are okay because they're breathing really hard. They will stop arguing and try to pay attention to their breathing, resulting in the end of that discussion. Story 31. Self-deprecating humor will win over people. You can't go too far, it can be depressing. But if you show you don't have a huge ego and can take a joke, people will be more prone to like you. Story 32. Okay, anything cool. But this reminds me of a prank my coworker used to do where they just randomly stop someone and go, "You know, I don't care what blank says about you. I like you," and then walk away. I knew it was a prank, but some people would get paranoid/anxious and start drama. It's a pretty good way to learn who's willing to start with people based off of rumors. Story 33. Not necessarily dark, but the illusion of choice is a helpful trick we learned in sales. If you ask someone, "When can we come for X?" more likely to say they're not available than if you ask, "Oh, what time works better for us to do X?" morning or evening. Works well in other places too, because it gives the person on the other end a feeling of autonomy, while at the same time you're getting what you want. Story 34. I worked for a retail company that taught me how to say no to customers without ever using the word no. It's incredibly effective. Replacing "no, we can't do that" with something like "as it turns out, our policy is XYZ." People are more inclined to accept the hard truth that they can't have what they're asking for, whether it be reasonable or not. This works in my personal life too and has significantly reduced the amount of "well, why nots" I get from people. Story 35. If you're going on a second or third date, try to do something scary like a haunted house or thrill-seeking like a roller coaster or climbing activity or something. Date will confuse nerves and excitement with attraction to you. Bonus points if you're not scared or comfort them through it, they'll be more attracted to you. Story 36. One time I was volunteering at a shelter and this guy was creeping on me and wouldn't leave me alone. My female co-volunteer and I kept telling him to go away and that he was making us uncomfortable. I finally just smiled and said, "Bye," and waved. He finally walked away. So if someone is talking to you and you really don't want them to talk, I guess instead of giving out commands, just say cordially and confidently "bye" or "have a nice day." Like you're assuming that they're leaving and they'll likely be compelled to walk away. It's worked on bullies in the past too. Story 37. Mimicking emotions is a big one. If you're able to recreate emotions, you can control others' reactions to you. Happiness is a big one. If you can mimic that, you can make anyone believe you're happy, but the reality is you aren't.